Could the Dallas Cowboys be bringing back a former star to help their playoff run? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That is $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to talk about some of our all-22 notes from the Cowboys' win over the Lions. But Landon, it's been a couple days since you and I talked. We recorded on Sunday afternoon during the 1 o'clock games. Some stuff has happened since then. Let's start with the Eagles because we have to, right?
Let's start with the Eagles just to kind of make this day so nice.
Just to pull back the curtains a little bit. So Landon and I were recording around halftime of the Eagles-Cardinals game when we did our post-game show of the Cowboys. And I told Landon, I said, hey, the Cardinals are hanging around a little bit in this game. And you were shocked.
I was shocked because I had walked away from the game at that point because I was just like, this doesn't look like this is happening.
Not only did the Cardinals hang around, but they upset the Eagles in Philadelphia, which means the Cowboys, all they have to do now is win against the Commanders in Week 18 and the NFC East, and the number 2 seed is theirs. Well, what are your thoughts on that whole situation?
I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this. First of all, if you haven't seen it, please go onto YouTube and check out my Locked On Now. At the moment I realized this was happening, I was live from inside my daughter's tent as we were having a tea party. So I definitely made sure that she got a cameo in there. So definitely go in there and say hi. I think the first thing I thought was, man, think about all the hand-wringing that was done over the losses over the Bills and Dolphins games that they ended up literally meaning nothing.
Especially
the Dolphins game. So, I think for us, it's like you finally got the ball to bounce the right way. Now you got to take advantage of it. For the Eagles, I mean, they're just a team in complete free fall right now. I mean, to lose to Arizona on the road the way they did after being up by more than 2 touchdowns at one point, it's disaster. There's been talk from Josina Anderson, whispers on Twitter about some big movements happening, some surprising big movements happening in the NFC East. Obviously, Washington wouldn't be a surprise firing. Maybe it's New York, but there's been a lot of thoughts that it's something involved in Philadelphia, and you have to think, man, that seems outrageous. They were in the Super Bowl last year, but the truth of the matter is that I still can't get over it. Every single time I've repeated it to people, they are 1-4 in December. They have lost 4 of their last 5 games. That's historically a bad collapse.
And the only game they won was against the Giants, in a game they very well could have lost at home.
That's right. And it's like, I think a lot of, again, I would love for all the Cowboys fans, all the everydayers especially, right? I want you to preserve in amber how you feel about this right now and how completely unlikely any of this was when the month of December started. Yeah. This was an unrealistic scenario. I think the percentages were down to like something like they were like 5 or 10%. I think like it was way down to the chances the Cowboys would win the NFC East. And guess what? It did happen. So this, I think, if anything, is the ultimate case that the NFL is completely unpredictable. Well, and that's why you have to continue to stack wins because you just never know what's going to happen.
I know from our friends at FanDuel like 3 weeks ago. It might have been, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the Cowboys were plus 875 to win the NFC East. And the last time I checked, which was yesterday, the Cowboys are minus 1,500 to win the NFC East now going into week 18 for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Cowboys are huge favorites over the Commanders. We'll talk about that later in the week.
Yep.
But also, The Eagles have to go play in New York, and Nick Sirianni just said a couple days ago, like, hey, we haven't decided whether we're going to play starters or not. Like, there's not a lot for us to do here. Like,
I mean, even if they do, like, they almost lost to the Giants in Philly. They did lose to the Cardinals. I mean, and the Giants played a really tough game against a Rams team that has been playing well lately. So, I mean, I don't know what I would do if I was Nick Sirianni, honestly. I mean, it's easy for us to come in here and like make fun of him for like, sitting the starters when it's not all said and done. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. You got to do something. You got to.
Well, I think the fear is that you're probably going to have to play on the road next week, anyways. Do you really want some of your older players like Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson and Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham to have even more snaps on their body in a game that might end up being meaningless for them, anyways? That's for them to figure out, not for us. We've got some other news, Landon, to talk about.
Yeah.
One of the most shocking things I've seen for the Cowboys in a while: Lyle Collins and Damian Wilson are in Dallas today working out for the Cowboys. I mean, I'm shocked. What are your thoughts?
Well, honestly, it's easy for us to lump these two together because it's similar sort of situations. But I would argue that,
right?
Well, yeah, same draft. Yeah, I would argue that Lyle Collins' situation is way more surprising than Damian Wilson. This is going to be a problem we're going to have in this podcast. I'm already telling you right now, Marcus. Damian Wilson coming back. Look, he went off to Kansas City, won a Super Bowl with them. Congratulations. Played pretty well. Was a starter next to another Cowboys legend, Anthony Hitchens, over there.
He's not working out for the team, by the way.
No, as far as we know so far. Who knows? He may have just tagged along in Damian's car on the way to the Frisco. So, I think that's surprising. I don't know how much football he has left in him. The Lyle Collins one is like, I mean, it just feels like that bridges had been burnt, and that like, and that there had been hurt feelings and things that, kind of weren't going to be able to kind of easily be revived. And I have to imagine that a huge component of this is twofold: is Lyle lives in Dallas, and so that it's easy to kind of get him in and see where he's at. And B, one of his best friends is the quarterback of the team. So, Dak needs a fishing partner. And so, I think that's something to, I mean, I don't mean that literally, but I mean, I think the fact is that since Dak is friendly with him, put in probably a good word, this coaching staff doesn't really have very much experience with him. If you think about it, certainly not positive experience. So I think it's an interesting thought process. I have to believe that it has everything to do with what's going on with Tyler Smith and the hope that you could get some snaps at left guard and potentially tackle from Lyle Collins. But it certainly was surprising news. And when they announced it and that he was getting a workout, I kind of read through it quickly and I was like, oh, okay, cool. He's getting a workout. And I didn't see it was for the Cowboys. And then it just kind of kept on popping up in the timeline. I was like, oh wait, he's working out for the Cowboys. It really was very surprising, to be honest.
A couple things really quickly on Lyle before we move on. You mentioned the position flexibility. I think that's really intriguing for the Cowboys. If you want to have somebody that can potentially play left guard and give you some size, I think Collins helps there. It's also important to remember that he tore his ACL, I believe it was at the end of the 2022 season. So maybe now that we're full, 12 months removed, maybe he is just healthier, and that's why he didn't get any offers and any of that kind of stuff. So another thing to keep in mind. There's also, if you read the Tom Pelissero report, it's that the Cowboys are looking at bringing him in as a practice squad guy, which means they could sign him to the practice squad. Obviously, he wouldn't play this week, but they would have the 3 elevations in the playoffs if you would need it. So that way you wouldn't have to cut somebody like TJ Bass, who you like long-term, but you might not like in a playoff game against the 49ers or the Lions or whatever. I don't know if I would like Lyle Collins in those games either, but at least it's somebody who is a veteran, who's been in playoff games, who has a lot of size and strength. It's really a no-risk option here.
Yeah, and it gives you options. I think that's the key thing, right? Is that you're not relying on only Lyle Collins to come in and play left guard. You've already got TJ Bass, and that's if Tyler Smith can't play, right? So, I think this is more about just providing depth for a situation that's become a little bit less stable since Tyler's situation. Because even if Tyler does play, let's say he gets into the game and he just can't do it, right? Like
Yep.
you need
Yep.
DJ Bass, and then at that point you need somebody to be his backup in case something happens to DJ Bass. So it makes some sense. It's just the name is very surprising and shocking, I think, more than anything. I would
be
point out
honest,
the fight. Yeah, go ahead.
If the report was that the Cowboys were bringing in Rolando McClain like for a workout, that would have
Well,
been less surprising to me than Lyle Collins.
it should be because Rolando McClain is who they should be bringing in. I digress on that, but I did think it was funny. I mean, you pointed it out that they mentioned, playing, getting into playing shape. That's an issue with Lyle Collins. So, I mean, whether or not he's in playing shape now or whether he needs to get into playing shape, it may be a while before he's in, ready to go shape.
There was a video that was released like 2 months ago. I'm not going to say who reported it or whatever, but there was like a workout video of Lyle Collins where there was a lot of just like sitting down, wiping a towel across his face. Like
I think we're seeing that. Yeah.
I think
hype video.
I wouldn't be surprised if Lyle's going to need a lot of time to get ready. And maybe this is more of a future thing too, where the Cowboys bring him in and let's see if he can get healthy. And by 2024, maybe there's a situation that opens up. But we've got a lot of other things to talk about, especially from this wild Cowboy Lions game on Saturday night. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 bonus dollars in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options available, including live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, or you can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub and check out the most popular parlays on the site and so much more. You can still go bet on the futures market. You can bet on where everybody's going to line up in terms of the seeding, how far everybody's going to get into the playoffs. It's absolutely incredible. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, later, let's talk about some stars from the Cowboys win over the Lions. You and I both want to talk about Donovan Wilson, but what did you see on the tape?
I just, he looks healthier. I think, it just looks back to kind of what we're used to seeing. He was all over the place. I mean, he was in the box making plays, hard tackling. I think the thing that really kind of showed me, or that I felt like I hadn't seen from him in a while, was kind of those striking tackles in which he just flings guys to the ground once he attaches to them. And then that's the kind of signature Donovan Wilson hit that it felt like had been missing at certain points in this year. I mean, just to remind everyone, he had a calf injury that had kept him out of basically all of training camp. He came back, I think, a couple weeks into the season, and it just felt like it was a very slow start for him. He just didn't seem the same kind of dynamic player that he was. That wasn't the problem against Detroit. He was all over the place as a run defender, striking, taking on linemen and discarding them and getting into the hole to make tackles. He was making plays as a pass defender in the back end. I'm thinking specifically of that goal line play where he had a pass defense and almost had an interception. There were just, and then, obviously just a couple of different plays out in the flat and in the back end of coverage. When he's right, when he's comfortable and he's healthy, having that level of kind of versatile playmaker, it's like having Hooker. Hooker is like this really steady presence who can do a little bit of everything. He's just solid, all the time. Whereas Wilson, when he's healthy, he isn't quite as solid as Hooker, but he is volatile in a positive and negative way. And I think what we saw was a lot of that positive volatility happening where he's, mixing it up. He's being a physical presence. He's being a useful pass defender. And then on top of that, he's making plays. He's driving the ball out of the hands. He's taking ball carries down with authority and setting the tone for the defense. We need more of this. We need more of this Donovan Wilson moving forward. I'm hoping that, as we get further and further away from that calf injury, he starts feeling more and more comfortable.
So I've got this notebook of like things I just jot down throughout the games. And I thought he played his best game of the season against Philadelphia like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then he played the 2 games against Buffalo and Miami on the road. And I'm trying not to be dramatic, but I thought he might have been their worst defender in those 2 games.
Yeah.
He just did not play.
Really
Him and Marquise
So
Bell
did
did
not
not.
play
Yeah, they really struggled. And then in this game, he was their best secondary player. It's I don't know if it's a home away split where he's just so much better at home than he is on the road.
I looked at that too, but he had a couple of really good away games earlier in the middle of the season too. So
he did it. This is just a different Donovan Wilson, and you can feel it in the defense when he's healthy and playing well. They just have a little bit different of an edge when he's flying all over the field. The other guy that's kind of the same way is Jordan Lewis, who we can talk about Jordan Lewis now. Easily the best Jordan Lewis game that I've seen from him this season. I think you would agree. It just felt like he had such a beat on what Detroit was trying to do. He was jumping screens. He was making tackles. When Wilson and Lewis are playing this kind of football, their defense can be as good as any other team in the league.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, let's talk about who we were playing. This is one of the best offenses in all of football. Again, the best play designer maybe in all of football at this point, or at least one of them outside of Kyle Shanahan, right? And this is an offense that I'm pretty sure was tied with San Francisco with the most 20-yard plays coming into this game. So this isn't a joke, and this defense limited them to 19 points. And I think you mentioned it. You don't do that just if your superstars are playing well, just if it's Micah Parsons or D-Law. We'll talk about D-Law in a bit, for God's sakes.
He has to have his own segment.
What a play. What a game. I mean, but Jordan, I just felt like physical, making tackles on the edge. I also thought, look, Deron Bland didn't have a superb coverage game, but he was incredibly solid as a tackler, made several key tackles. The tackling on the edge was very good in this game. But back to Jordan Lewis, I really loved on the interception. He saw it the whole way. Like you saw the Williamson coming across the formation, or is it Jameson Williams coming across the formation, as a motion guy. Lewis recognizes immediately. And then when Williams turns backfield instead of upfield, like you would normally, like you're coming out in a route, Lewis immediately recognized what was happening and didn't hesitate a second, pulled the trigger, beat the ball to the spot, and then was able to get the interception. When he's able to kind of play free and let his tape study and his knowledge and his instincts kind of take hold, Jordan Lewis is a very, very good slot corner, and he is really good, especially at being physical, mixing it up on the edge, destroying screens. Those are all things that Jordan Lewis really, really, really thrives at.
And if you look forward to the playoffs, there's 3 teams that are the most likely the Cowboys are going to play in the playoffs. Number 1 is Green Bay. Number 2 is the Rams, and number 3 is Tampa Bay, if the Cowboys would happen to lose. All 3 of those teams use 3 or more wide receivers, which means Jordan Lewis is going to be on the field a bunch. They're going to need this version of Jordan Lewis to get past those 3 teams. And then even looking forward, if the Cowboys were happen to win the first round of the playoffs, whether you play Detroit in round 2 or the Rams in round 2, like you're going to have to play some teams that have some really good slot receivers. I don't know if Jordan Lewis can repeat this performance because this is unbelievable, but to me, it's the tackling. Like he was such a good tackler in this game, and that's what the Cowboys need to be a better run defense team, is to have your corners and your safeties just don't miss tackles when you need to make them.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's a big note to mention overall. It just feels like it was a little bit better last week, but the Buffalo game was a low point for tackling on the defense. And it feels like this was a true return to form. I think that, like I said, they were working back. They weren't bad last week. It was certainly better than it was the previous week in Buffalo. And this week, it was definitely more what we expect. When I talked about Bland, you mentioned Lewis. I mean, obviously Wilson had an incredible tackling game as well. So there were definitely still some missed tackles. I mean, it's going to happen with some of these great players on that offense. But I think for the most part, they got what they needed to do. They were able to stop teams short. You didn't see a bunch of situations where a 6-yard or 4-yard gain turned into a 6-yard gain or that sort of thing. So they certainly seem to clean things up on the tackling side, especially in the secondary.
All right, we need to have a conversation about DeMarcus Lawrence because yet again, he had another huge game. We will get to him next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've had playing DFS because there's just so many different players and stat projections to choose from. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return for the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions. So make sure you send them into us at Marcus_Mosher, at McCoolBCB. But let's take the next 5 minutes to talk about DeMarcus Lawrence because yet again, whenever the Cowboys needed a big play, it was DeMarcus Lawrence. What a season Lawrence is having here. Was this year 9, year 10?
Yep, you're 9. It seems like exaggeration now. We talk about it all the time, and he is just he can't stop making these kind of key plays especially it seems to be especially at these kind of short yardage situations.
Oh yeah,
right. It just seems like he really is so well studied and well versed in what each team specifically is looking to do in short yardage situations. And so he has a good idea of how the offensive linemen want to attack him. And here's the thing, Marcus, is that it's not even just like he's always on the edge. They move him around. They put him inside, and no matter where it is, when the snap comes, he knows exactly what he's doing. He appears to know exactly what the offensive lineman across from him is doing. And then the way the result of it is that he fires out of his snap, does whatever, move he's going to do to get your hands off of him. And then by the time he's done, he's in the backfield so quick that the ball carrier has probably just gotten the ball. And sometimes it feels like he's going to get the ball before the ball carrier. And so there's just the results are you've seen now like 4 or 5 different plays where and honestly, they're littered throughout the season where it's 3rd and 3 or it's 4th and 2 or it's 3rd and 1. And it feels like they're going to an inevitable conversion. And suddenly DeMarcus, or, honestly, it happens even on second down, like a second and short, right? And it feels like they're going to convert. Suddenly DeMarcus Lawrence hits the running back 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and now it's 3rd and 5, or it's a turnover because it's a 4th down, or it's a 3rd and long, or now it's 4th and they got a punt. There's just so many different times that DeMarcus Lawrence has made the play that has ended the drive. And it's not maybe it's not a turnover, or maybe it's not a specific splash play,
Mm-hmm.
but in the grand scheme of what we're talking about, it's an enormous play. It's an enormous play, and that's what it feels like DeMarcus Lawrence does better than anybody else. He uses his hand technique and his savvy to defeat blocks that he knows are coming at key moments in the game, and then creates the big negative play that the defense needs to stiffen up and eliminate the drive. And it just feels like he does this over and over and over again. And Cowboys fans should just be over the moon with this guy right now.
One of the stats that I saw this morning that I thought was shocking is it's not shocking to learn that DeMarcus Lawrence leads the Cowboys in run stops. He has 29 of them. Not surprising.
Yeah.
He's done it on 209 run snaps.
That's incredible. That's amazing.
The rate at which he's getting a stop is absolutely unbelievable. He has less than 600 snaps on the season that he's played. There's been years before where we don't even get to Thanksgiving. He's already over 600 snaps.
That's right.
The Cowboys have done a great job of managing his snaps, keeping him fresh. And then he just seems to rise up whenever the Cowboys need him. And he's got this really cool thing that he does in these short yardage situations where, like right before the snap, like I'm talking like right before the snap, he's switching kind of where he's at. Like he's just kind of shooting. Gaps. He shifts gaps and he's able to cross the offensive lineman's face so quickly and get into the backfield. And then on top of that, he's giving you a lot as a pass rusher as well. It's unbelievable how many like game-winning plays, not game-winning plays, but you know what I mean? Like game-changing plays that he makes seemingly every week that kind of go unnoticed because it's just DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah. And it just, just a game changer, and I think game winning is fair. I don't, maybe not literally in the sense that it's a go ahead play, but in the sense that, what it takes to win a game is plays like what DeMarcus Lawrence provides, provided throughout the season. So I can't say enough of him, guys. If you need more convincing, again, go hit up John Owning. He's been prophesizing this for years. Look, I think that Lawrence has had a career that's been kind of wavering here and there because of contract stuff and how people get stupid about how they feel about players when players sign big contracts. But DeMarcus Lawrence is I don't know, like if he isn't the complete mascot of this team, the veteran guy that you love to love, who is just gritty and makes the plays and is selfless. And I just don't understand how you love the Cowboys and you don't love DeMarcus Lawrence.
It's why I want them to win the division so bad, because guys like DeMarcus Lawrence and those guys, and Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, who've all battled this year through injuries, have been on this team for a while to win 12 games, win the division. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but that means something. Mike McCarthy always talks about how your first goal is get into the playoffs. Second goal, win the division. I think it would be really cool if they could do it for players like Tank, for Zach Martin, for Tyron Smith. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Again, on tomorrow's show, we're answering your Twitter questions. On Thursday, we've got our crossover show with Locked On Commanders. Friday, we will get you ready for the final regular season game of the year. Make sure you guys are tuning in for that. Make sure you're following Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.